You should be good to go now.
Thank you. I now call to order the 407th regular meeting of the City of College Place Planning Commission. Will the clerk please take roll call?
I'll go ahead and do that here. Let me
Thank you.
get my screen up. Randall Brennis.
Present.
Brian Roth.
Present.
Ben Dawson. I believe Ben is here.
Present.
Thank you, Ben. Dennis Olson. Dennis is here as well. Curtis Nelson. I believe he is not present at this time. Leroy Wagoner.
Present.
And Todd Reiswig.
Present.
Excellent. So, Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum. Also in attendance this evening is myself, John Rickard, Community Development Director, Christy Sugar, our Community Development Assistant, and Greg Dorn with GR Dorn and Associates as our planning consultant. And then Lisa Neisel, City Clerk, is in attendance as well to help with any technical difficulties we might have with the meeting. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Have we received any public comment?
We did receive a public comment from Ms. Brochu, a letter of appreciation to the Planning Commission for all of your work through last year regarding the reestablishment of manufactured home park zoning. And so I encourage you to read through that letter. And then, Lisa, do we have anyone in attendance that is wishing to speak at this time? Going to assume her silence means no, we do not have anyone in attendance.
All right, then it's time for our consent agenda, consisting of tonight's agenda and the minutes from our October 19 meeting. Is there a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you.
A second. From
I second.
Randall.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Our consent agenda has been passed. So next we move to our regular agenda. And the first item on the list is commission appointments. Mr. Ricker, do you have some comment on that?
Well, we just briefly, we have a new commissioner that will be joining us, who we thought would be in attendance tonight. And that is Mr. Nelson. So his appointment letter is attached. In addition to that, Mr. Roth has accepted a second term, which is a 4-year term. So thank you both to your participation in this group, and we really value having members of the community serve on this board. There's a lot of good work that you all do, and it takes a lot of time and effort, and we really appreciate your willingness to serve in this capacity. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is election of officers for 2022. So we'll need a nomination for the chair and for the vice chair. And I'm willing to continue in my role, but I'm also quite content to share it if someone else is willing and ready to step up.
Commissioner Reiswig would be happy to nominate you to continue in your current role, as you're very thoughtful and efficient in the process.
Agree.
I'd welcome other nominations. All right. Well, hearing none, I suppose we call for a vote. Is that our next step, John?
I believe so.
All right.
Oh, do we? Yeah, we had a second. Who seconded that? I'm sorry. Was there a second of Mr.?
I kind of mumbled something out, but that really was meant to be a second.
Okay. So we do have a second by Mr. Wagner.
Yeah.
All right. Last chance for other nominations. All right. You're at risk of being stuck with me again. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Who's opposed? All right. Well, thank you. I'm honored to continue serving this role. We need a vice chair as well. And Commissioner Reiswig, I believe you've been serving as our vice chair.
I have. It's been very difficult, you know.
Thank you for your service. Well, as chair, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to make a nomination, but I'd be happy to entertain nominations.
Well, Randall Brennan, so I'll nominate Mr. Wagner.
Do we have the opportunity to decline?
You can if you wish.
I wouldn't mind waiting a year or two since I'm on here until the end of 2024.
I will make a note to nominate you next year for chair.
Okay, whatever.
All right, so we need another nomination for vice chair.
I'd like to see Mr. Reiswig continue. That's a nomination.
Very
I
good.
would second that.
Are there any other nominations? All right. Well, then all in favor of Commissioner Reiswig continuing as our vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Commissioner Reiswig. We'll try to make your job tougher this year. All right, we are on to item number 3, the Master Plan Development Code. Mr. Rickard.
Yeah, so I'm going to turn this over to Greg. This is something that he introduced to Mike Rizzatello and myself late last year as an idea of how to deal with larger developments, larger tracts of land, and it just gives us another tool in our toolbox on how to approach development. And Greg has some experience implementing this in Castle Rock, and so he's going to go through the draft that we have and just kind of feel free to interrupt and ask questions as we go through. I think 20 minutes or so time on this should probably be good, and then we can move on to the next agenda item. But we're interested in hearing your feedback, and if this is something that you want to continue to work through the process this coming year. So with that, Greg, if you would hand the reins over to you. And I guess I need to share my screen with you. I'm going to stop my share, Greg, and you should be able to share now. And you're on mute, Greg. You're still on mute, Greg.
How's that?
There we go.
So you can hear me, and do we have the on the screen now, the draft document?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, thank you. And Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. As John mentioned, on several occasions, he and I and the city administrator have talked about economic development strategies and opportunities in the city, and actions that the city might take to facilitate development that's consistent with the vision and the goals and policies and in the comprehensive plan. And one of the things that we discussed, as many cities have discussed recently, is that development is getting more and more difficult all the time, for a variety of reasons. Increased regulations at the state and federal level, occasionally increased regulations at the local level, but a lot of it just has to do with the limited supply of land that is really suitable for development, and that has been that has access to necessary city services. Now, we have talked, and one of the items we've talked about and we'll be pursuing this year is discussion with the county about changes to the countywide planning policies and some of the methodologies used to evaluate urban growth areas, with an eye toward being able to have a more flexible or a robust system for increasing urban growth areas to encourage and facilitate desired development in the communities throughout the county. But one of the particular challenges is mixed use developments and developments that are implemented over time in accordance with the master plan. And traditional zoning just isn't a tool that was designed to facilitate that. And so as cities have been trying to find a better tool, in recent years, the notion of adding regulations to allow master plan developments with a particular emphasis on master planned mixed use developments in all zoning districts is something that has proven to be a very effective tool. And as John mentioned, I've had the opportunity to work with several communities in the last couple of years in thinking through and developing these regulations. And I am currently involved in a project right now where in the past year, a city of about 2,500 people the city council approved a master plan that is going to guide the development of approximately 120 acres. And under that master plan, we're going to see the development of about 50 acres in a business park with flexible space that can be used for a variety of light manufacturing activities. There'll be 11 acres or so of commercial development. There'll be provisions for about 200 additional housing units, mostly, if not all entirely multifamily. There will be an RV park added to the development, and then there will be open space and critical areas preserved, a series of trails and the like. So it will be the largest and arguably the most significant development in this town. And that property had been zoned for light industrial uses for over 30 years now, and there was no activity. And it turned out that a combination of timing and good fortune and the adoption of the new code that facilitated the review and approval of master plan developments has come together. That master plan has been approved, and the city and the developer have already started the review and approval of the first phase of the development of the project. So it's pretty exciting. And so I can say from experience, it can work in the right set of circumstances. And the regulations that Castle Rock adopted are very similar to regulations that several other cities have recently adopted. So it's been somewhat vetted, but there may be some revisions or changes that would be appropriate to make it fit best in College Place. But the good news is we don't have to start from ground zero. And recently, there have been a number of discussions with some developers of some of the larger vacant parcels in the city who have looked at several different design or development scenarios. And mixed use development is very much on their mind. And a phased development that can occur over time is very much in their plans. And so that has led to a request from the city administrator and the mayor, and through John as community development director, down to me and us to see if we can't expedite the preparation of some regulations to guide master plan developments with an emphasis on mixed use projects, and bring a recommendation to the city council for implementation early in 2022. So it's a long way of saying that this has the potential to be an exciting opportunity for the city. And if some of the discussions that we're hearing from the development community kind of continue to progress, there certainly could be the opportunity for some significant development in the city in the coming years. But what we wanted to do tonight is preview the regulations that we took, and from College Place, they're under review in the city of Newport right now in Eastern Washington. They've been adopted by the city of Kelso, which is the same size as College Place. So we've looked at several examples, made some minor modifications and changes, and even asked some folks in the development community to preview them and offer some comments. And with that, in your packet, we were able to provide you with some draft regulations and to start the review and discussion. And as John said, we hope to introduce the subject tonight, invite any immediate comments that you might have, and then allow some time for additional review and discussion by the commission. But then we would also like to get it out for public review and comment. So as you have it in the past, would have an opportunity to review those comments and conduct a public hearing before making a recommendation to the city council. So that's my long-winded introduction. And John and Mr. Chair, I'll stop to see if there's anything you'd like to add before I jump in and start talking about the details of how master plan developments might be formulated, reviewed, and potentially approved in the city.
Well, I don't have anything to add at this time, Greg.
Mr. Chair?
Are there any questions from the commissioners on the purpose of this document? Any big picture questions before we dive into the details?
Yeah, I had a question. Is there I guess, yeah, just as a clarifier, the the existing tools that we have in place, they're not, maybe if you could just repeat again, I know you explained it, but what
Sure.
exactly does it benefit us to go through this? It expedites the development process. Is that it? Or it makes it more, or does it just make it more flexible?
It provides for a degree of flexibility. Traditional zoning, we would have, for instance, a light industrial zone, a commercial zone, maybe, a downtown zone like the College Avenue zone that you have, and some specific standards to those zones. But especially in things like light industrial or even the residential zoning, the standards and the permitted uses focus on tied to the what is the nature of the zoning, light industrial or residential. So if somebody comes in, like in the case of Castle Rock, and says we want to have a primarily light industrial, that corresponds with the zoning, but they said we'd also like to add some commercial and we'd like to add some residential, and there's no provisions in their zoning code for that, because it's kind of that traditional notion that light commercial should be here, or light industrial should be here, commercial should be here, residential should be here, and things shouldn't be mixed. And so there's a recognition now that the market is such that we really want to have mixed use developments, that housing near a commercial area or integrated into a development is not a negative, for instance. So it really is designed to help provide a degree of flexibility so that you have standards that are really kind of custom made to the project, as opposed to trying to say one size fits all. Here's what the standards are for light industrial, and everybody's going to do it this way.
Got it.
All right, any other questions before we move on? All right, Mr. Dorn, lead us through the document.
Great. So what would happen is we would still retain the existing zoning in the city with residential, single family residential, multifamily, commercial, light industrial, but within the table of permitted uses, that list of what's permitted in each zoning district, we would add a line item that says master plan developments. And a master plan development, which would be defined in the regulations, would be permitted in all zoning districts through a conditional use permit. So that would be the first step. So we would be specifically identifying master planned projects that feature a mix of uses as a permitted use in each zoning district. First step. Then what we would do, and you'll see in the regulations in a minute, is the project sponsor would go through a public process to prepare and present a master plan for public review and comment, and there would be specific development standards proposed, reviewed, and approved that would guide that future development, and they would be unique to that project. And it would go through environmental review. It would go through review by the city hearings examiner. So there would be opportunities for public review and comment. And the hearings examiner would then make a recommendation to the city council, who would do the final review and approval. It would, in most if not all instances, there would be a development agreement, which is a form of a contract between the project sponsor and the city, spelling out rights, responsibilities, and obligations. And because it would end up in the form of a contract, that's why it would go to the city council so that they have the final approval authority on what the city and the developer are contracting and agreeing to do. So that's the basic kind of framework of it. That's what you see in that first paragraph on the screen there. And what I'd like to do is go to and show you now what the regulations specifically say. So you can see once again, master plan developments. There's an introduction. There it identifies what the application requirements are, what the uses and standards are, what criteria used to review and approve, the approval of the process, how a development agreement is exercised, and if need be, how there's modifications. So those are the basic chapters. And you'll see under the introduction and uses, they still got Castle Rock there. So you can see that we, cut and paste will clean that up. But here's the key things, economic development, job creation, investment, increased housing opportunities, facilitate the development of larger areas. A perfect example would be the McKiernan Christensen property or the area around the airport. Two significant in terms of size, significant in terms of opportunity, but undeveloped lands in the city. The phased development, flexibility, planning and building infrastructure in an orderly and responsible manner, protecting environmental features, minimize and avoid adverse impacts, trying to coordinate applications, looking at strategies for sharing costs and recovering costs, and promoting environmentally sustainable development. Those are the kinds of things that we're hoping to accomplish through this. And as I said, it could take the form of a residential, commercial, industrial, or a mixed-use project, really focusing on the larger projects. And as a mixed use, it could be permitted in any zoning district, but the additional uses have to be compatible with the underlying uses. Going to the case in College or in Castle Rock, once again, as an example, that land was zoned light industrial. The primary uses are light industrial, and the other uses that were added are being added based on a finding that they would be compatible with the primary use of the site is light industrial. There's a number of different ways we accomplish that, but we don't want to be, creating a conflict. We want to be promoting compatibility, which is what the legal basis of zoning is all about. And so generally it's going to be on a 10 or more acre site. Project sponsors can propose a development as a master plan development, but the ultimate say is the city's, yes, we think it fits and it meets the general criteria and warrants the expenditure of the time and energy to make this work. And encourage innovative techniques, authorize code interpretations, the kind of things that makes a difference in the development community. So what does the application look like then? Well, we define the project boundaries, all the property within the boundaries, all the properties in the vicinity of it. We make sure that the existing conditions are well documented, that we get the types of developments that are occurred in a description, of them and the primary uses and the secondary or ancillary uses. We look to see if the areas that are suitable for development, not suitable for development, have been protected or set aside, and look at things like access, internal circulation, connectivity, and the like. We look to make what are the plans for public utilities, and it's an opportunity for the project sponsor to propose modifications to the city's standards, explain why they're needed, phasing, and strategy. What did they do in terms of the design to try to minimize or avoid adverse environmental impacts whenever possible. They would have to do a SEPA checklist, and in all likelihood, it would include a number of technical studies. It could even rise to the level of an environmental impact statement in some cases, and also a title report to make sure that we know who the property owners are and any things that are on the title that might affect the development potential of the area, like easements and the like. And then, like I said, the project sponsor can propose alternative standards and uses. And the city, they can be approved. The city finds that they aren't going to adversely affect the public health and safety. They're equivalent or better than the standards that are already in place. They're consistent with the comprehensive plan. They're necessary for a reason, and they're in the public interest. So there, in this process, there's a lot of informal discussions between the project sponsor and the city staff. And at some point, if it looks like this is a project that is going to proceed, there would be the execution of a cost recovery agreement. So the project sponsor would reimburse the city for all expenses that they occurred in the review and approval of their application. So it doesn't have an adverse budget impact on the city. At some point, the informal discussions become more formal, and there's a pre-application meeting where the plans are spelled out in more detail, and the city staff is able to provide the project sponsor with feedback and say, here's some of the issues that you're really going to have to address in this area in order to have a viable application and project. And here's the application requirements and the like. And they get a written summary of that. And then they, the project sponsor proceeds with preparing the application materials. And when they submit them, they're reviewed at the staff level. And if they're deemed to be complete and ready for processing, then a notice of application is circulated. It's sent to agencies, it's posted online, it's sent to property owners in the vicinity, and people are advised that the city has received an application. Here are the application materials, and the agency and the public has an opportunity to comment before the city even starts its review process. There may in fact be things that are known to neighboring property owners or known to agencies that are important, that need to be built into the process right up front. So that's what this accomplishes. In the case in Castle Rock, for instance, when we sent out the first notice of application, some of the neighbors had observed at some time in the past a ceremony conducted by the members of local Indian tribe, and that suggested that there was a sacred site within the project boundaries. And the feedback from the neighbors early on was very, very helpful, because it got the project sponsor connected with the tribe and learned more about the sacred site and the like, and so it helped kind of avoid a misunderstanding or development in an area that could have had some adverse impacts on the community. So there's that initial notice. Then the city development review team, chaired by John, would jump in and in detail review the project, the proposal, the measures, and there would be typically some give and take back and forth. And during the analysis, be looking at conditions of approval or refinement to what has been proposed. And ultimately, a staff report is prepared. It is publicly distributed and made available in advance of the hearing. And then the city hearings examiner conducts a hearing and receives comments on the staff report. And the hearings examiner then considers all comments and makes a recommendation to the city council. So you really have a kind of a second opinion, if you will, or a quality control check on the work of the city staff. And it then goes to the city council for review and ultimately approval. And as I mentioned before, it's concluded by the execution of a development agreement, and based on a determination that the standards are provide for compatible land uses, provides for, helps avoid and minimize adverse impacts, and really provides the context or a framework for a development that fits within the community and that all can be proud of. And so those are the steps. And like I say, it's been tested now a couple of times, but using the example of, say, the McKiernan Christensen project, where the primary focus consistent with the zoning would be on residential, but this would be the means to be able to provide or add in commercial development to that site, to potentially add some light industrial manufacturing if it was compatible, and to allow for multifamily development or innovative approaches to residential development, because we're finding more and more the traditional notion of 6,000 square foot or 5,000 square foot single family lots are just contribute to making housing too expensive, and a higher degree of flexibility is necessary. So all those types of things could be accomplished under this. It's a long way of saying that it has many of the attributes and characteristics of what we might refer to as contract zoning or a sub-area plan, where standards are developed for a specific development, and the development occurs consistent with those standards, and everybody involved knows what to expect, whether the development might take 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or even up to 20 years to implement. So, Mr. Chair, that's a good place for me to stop and see if you or members of the commission have any questions about what I've outlined.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn. Are there questions from the commissioners?
This is Randall Brenes. I do have some questions and I guess sort of suggestions. I would think that maybe there should be a role for the Planning Commission in this process. I think the way that that this goes, you know, I know for approval and going to the hearings examiner, that's more of kind of like the legal side of it, although I know it goes to council. But I think from a Planning Commission, to kind of see more policy issues, I guess, and how the proposal might impact the planning regulations and so forth. And I know staff will do that, but I guess as a member of the Planning Commission, I think that I would like to see a role for the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Then the other thought that I had is, so the city signs, in a sense, a contract with a developer. What safeguards, or how do we ensure that the developer, for instance, if it was in light industrial, we've been using that. The primary purpose is for light industrial uses, but now we're going to allow some commercial and residential. Well, what if the developer goes and does the commercial and residential first, and maybe it's 10, 15 years later and hasn't done anything to do with the light industrial?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so is there some way of ensuring that the plan kind of is developed and so that it meets the standards, you know, like the whole idea, not that they focus on one of those and kind of forget about the other. And then the other part is, you know, what happens to, for instance, if the developer goes bankrupt and now we have a partially built or completed plan. That's another concern I have. And we kind of saw it a little bit in Walla Walla here recently at the mall, where we had a developer that went and did a lot of demolition, a lot of work, went bankrupt, and then the site for several years was just a mess. And you know, eventually it got sold and somebody else stepped in and completed it. But I just kind of want to make sure that the city has some tools so that we could potentially review, revoke, or maybe even have some, in that case, was some way of enforcing, even going and cutting down the weeds. So anyway, so that's just some comments that came to mind.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. Are there other comments?
Thoughts or comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I've got a couple. This is Commissioner Ricewig. Excuse me. I know first, I got to say, in general, I'm opposed to mixed use development. It's been implemented well elsewhere in the country, not just around the state. On larger developments, would there then be some requirements potentially for property to be provided or donated towards critical infrastructure for the city? I know, for example, when the areas surrounding Boise were growing, a lot of the very large developments would provide property for schools, so the municipalities were able to build infrastructure that was needed, not acquire the land. And then secondly, I want to make sure that the timelines are protected. You put a lot of effort and dollars into coming up with a master plan, and then sometimes you have legal timelines within which you have to get things done for, say, short platting and recording of stuff, and making sure that we protect that investment by the developer as well. So there's once the master plan's approved, as long as it happens with some forward motion, that they're not out hundreds or thousands of dollars just because the market slowed down or things changed.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Reiswig. Any other comments?
Thoughts or comments, questions?
I would like to just say that generally speaking, I like the concept, and I'm hoping that we can come up with something that's satisfactory. I agree with the comments that have been stated here, though, so I'm with you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, Mr. Rickard, anything that you want to add here before we move to our next agenda item?
No, not at this time. I think what we'll do is, it sounds like there's some interest, so we'll look into this a little bit further, try to answer some of your comments, questions, and bring this back to you probably next month for just probably a more in-depth discussion if needed. Greg, do you have any parting thoughts on this?
No, I think, and maybe what we'll do is bring some examples of what a master plan might look like and what a development agreement might entail, because some of the points that were made are right on to ensure that there are, performance measures and standards in place so that if infrastructure, for instance, is going to be built in phases, that each phase is a standalone phase, that it will function properly. Whether, the next phase is built or when it is built, and to make sure that there are some standards to ensure that if things are going to be accomplished in increments, that that there are incremental contributions. As an example, if there's supposed to be 100 acres of open space, either the open space is identified up front, which is the best way, so you can see that there's 100 acres, or if it can be done in phases to make sure that each phase contributes to the requirement, so you don't get a situation where, as one of you described, the developer could say, well, I just did phases 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I was going to do this and this in phase 6, and wouldn't you know, I just ran out of time and money. Doggone it. So yeah, we can give you some examples of what how some of those protections might work, and then backed up by the getting a lot of eyes on it to make sure that everybody is looking at it to make sure that it's going to play out as intended. So the comments are on point, and we'll bring some additional information back at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. So then we'll move to our last regular agenda item, which is Affordable Housing Action Plan Implementation Strategies. And Mr. Rickard, do you have a quick update on action from the City Council since our last meeting?
Yes, just hang on one second here.
Let's see, I can go ahead and John and put it up on the screen. I think I could still screen share.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I think, John, what you may have provided with the packet is some examples from the city of Walla Walla in terms of the type of actions that the city has taken to implement the housing action plan that was adopted within the region.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by this is from the affordable housing plan, and I'm confused by the heading on it, but because some of the items in here, the college places, for instance, like you look at that first, the cluster zoning, College Place, Dayton, we could benefit from doing that. So I'm not quite sure why it's not completely applicable all to Walla Walla. So so there are things in here that we should be considering. Go ahead, Greg. I'll turn back over to you.
So I think what the mayor and city council was looking for, we worked through the issue regarding the reinstatement of the manufactured housing communities but there is still a very significant challenge within the Walla Walla region to make sure that there is a reasonable supply of housing under any circumstances, and then more affordable housing. And the mayor and council have asked the planning commission to work with staff and go through this list and look at other items that may be actions that the city can entertain to promote additional housing construction and more affordable housing in the community. I was interested to hear last week when the governor was talking about the new legislative session, and the governor said he was going to introduce as executive request legislation new state regulations that would require cities of a certain size to permit smaller multifamily developments in any residential zone, even single family residential zones. And that, he said, is necessary because there's just such a critical shortage of housing throughout the state that we just can't afford the luxury anymore of saying that on this lot only one house will be built, that we have to allow opportunities for greater density and different types of development. Now, whether the legislature is going to pass that in what form, that remains to be seen, but it just underscores that at all levels the dilemma and the shortage of housing is being addressed. And so as we proceed in the next several meetings, we can certainly bring back ideas from a staff standpoint. But Mr. Chair, we wanted to invite you and commissioners to look through this list, and if you see items that you think would be appropriate to further discuss in College Place, we'd like to hear that from you, so that we can prepare for discussions at your upcoming meetings.
Yeah, there's some items in here that in this particular list from the study that jump out to me. Allowing up to 4 units per lot in the single family zone. I think that's a step that we could take. Walla Walla has been doing that the last couple of years. This might be a stretch, but requiring a minimum density instead of a maximum density in development. I think the list mentions 6 dwelling units per acre as a minimum density to shoot for in new developments. Remove some parking standards in the multifamily zones, or for ADA, or excuse me, not ADA, ADUs. There could be some stipulations along with that. For instance, if you're on a transit route, within a certain distance of a transit route, then maybe you reduce the parking requirements. Permit processing, streamlining, that's in the list. That's a challenge with an office this small to be able to get through the application processes quickly enough and in a timely manner. But there may be, we're looking at some software programs out there that might help streamline, hopefully, our process. There's a lot of processing in just getting applications routed to various departments, and so there's some streamlining that my department's hoping we can accomplish through some new development programs. One of the things I saw on the list was reducing or eliminating the 7,500 square foot requirement for duplexes. Right now, the code says you have to have a lot that's at least 7,500 square feet to build a duplex, and Walla Walla has removed that requirement, and I think that's something that we should consider for an affordable housing. And then one thing that's not in the list is to revisit what zones we allow residential development in. Should we allow multifamily developments to take place in the commercial zones? I think that's something that we have a lot of vacant commercial property in the city. And, you know, the last couple of years in particular, we've seen a transition away from the big box development. There's a lot more online, purchasing going on, smaller stores. So taking a look at the allowed uses that we have in our general commercial zone.
So John, just to clarify, this is Randall. And we do not allow multifamily on the commercial zone at this moment.
There is one little provision in there. If you're on if it's a mixed use, you can do it if it fronts on an arterial. So there's some stipulations in there that in our environment, mixed use buildings. Now you can have a mixed use site that might do just fine, but mixed use buildings we have seen to be a challenge in smaller urban areas like ourselves.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from commissioners?
So John, we would bring back some staff thoughts on this and ask the commission as they look over this list to think of items that kind of catch their attention, and so that we would an action item would be we would start to explore some potential strategies and recommendations that could make their way up to the city council. And so we have kind of the purpose of tonight's meeting is to kind of outline two of the primary things on our work plan for the coming year.
Yeah, real quickly before we leave this item, if there are any other comments about affordable housing and tools that you'd like to see and have us work on and possibly work into the zoning code, then please do let us know.
I have something, short comment. Ben here. I just want to say I really appreciate this approach to affordable housing. I think a lot of times it's easy to try to put more regulations and rent controls, and there's a whole option of things that are attempts, I think, at solving that problem. But fundamentally, I believe that affordable housing is when there's enough housing, and if there isn't enough housing, then it won't be affordable. So I just want to affirm that I think we're going the right direction.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Just one last thing, when you do look through that table, that there are a number of items that are listed in there as like anti-displacement and different scenarios, energy efficiency, different techniques, but I don't think a lot of them don't necessarily apply to what the Planning Commission's role is, but certainly other areas that the community at large other things that the community at large can do to help out affordable housing.
And I guess, John, we shouldn't limit ourselves to this list. If commissioners are aware from their work or their experiences or things they have seen or heard of or observed in other communities, we can certainly add to the list. I think it's kind of the challenge of the day is what are creative solutions that the city can advance to help support the development of more housing, and was just said, the more housing there is, the more affordable it can be. It's whenever the supply is limited of either the housing or the land or the materials that go into it, but as supply is limited, then that's what drives the cost up. And so a robust supply would certainly be an important step in that direction.
Very good. Well, as we're moving towards adjournment, are there any other items for the good of the order? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Thank you. Is there
I
a second?
second it. Randall seconds.
All right. If there's no one opposed, then we are adjourned at 8:02 p.m.
Thank you, Commissioner.